Alex here with part 10 of the Respondent. This chapter is either the longest chapter or at least the longest thus far. It was like a 45-minute audiobook chapter. There were both sort of abstract thoughts and specific courtroom experiences. He didn't go into a lot of detail on his courtroom experiences, but he did go into some detail, and I took notes on that as well. So I took a lot of notes on this chapter. I'm going to just start from the top and work my way down. Okay, this is actually my first note, and it's pretty insightful. He talks about how he had to reframe his life partner, the mother of his children, into his indefatigable enemy. This is crucial. I mean, I don't know if I like the word reframe, but in a sense, that's what you do have to do, and it's probably pretty accurate. You have to do it immediately. And even though he says that he had to do this, some of the things that he says he did in the chapter do not reflect this at all. Yes, though, 100% you do have to do this. I talk about this in the video, Stop Believing the Liar. And it is a sadly somewhat common thing that happens in these cases. From the perspective of fathers, they'll have an ex who accuses them of these horrible things, calls the police on them, tries to get restraining orders on them, accuses them of horrible crimes, all so that they can get a leg up in the custody/divorce. And these things are not normal. Normal people don't do these things. I mean, it's one thing to lie. It's another thing to deprive you of your rights through a court system. It's egregious, and yet at the same time there are so many people who don't seem to make that connection. And I mean, I'd like to say that I can't understand why, but I can. And that's what's horrible about this whole thing, is how much, and I talk about this in the video, how abusers win. How much of a parent's losses in court are because they're just falling for things. Not even really the system, not even the money, not even the lawyer. They're just their own worst enemy, making dumb mistakes. So yes, reframing his life partner was something that he had to figure out how to do. And that's something that we all have to figure out how to do. And immediately. And like I said in the video, stop believing the liar. Take it to heart, because, I mean, that's like step 0, not even step 1. Okay, let's move on. He says that he goes into the history of how he met his ex. Apparently, he met her in Las Vegas, which is actually where I am. He spends a lot of time on that. I didn't take many notes. I didn't, think I had much to relate to or to convey to you guys. He does mention, and this is what I was talking about earlier, that he sent her a text saying that we were like ships passing in the night, in dire need of marital navigation, and that she responded curt and clinical. And he characterized her response as deflection and suppression. I characterize it as gray rock. No, you should not be sending those types of communications to your ex when they have done horribly egregious things. This is a person who's been thrown into a psych ward once or twice, I don't remember. I think he spent some time in the back of a police car / jail. And after being lied about in multiple different courtroom hearings and all of these horrible things, he sends a text trying to make amends, and he's upset that she is responding in a way that he characterizes deflection and suppression. She responded the right way. That's what I would tell people to respond if they're in a high conflict child custody case. Gray rock. And to see this particular author characterize it in the way that he did just reminds me of the way that my ex characterized my gray rock responses. So this is definitely something that continues to sort of put to the forefront in my mind that this individual, this author, Gray Ellis, is not, at least I'm not convinced that he is the targeted parent. He is either the high conflict parent or he is wandering aimlessly. And it's just not good. When I saw that, it was very frustrating because just moments earlier, he was talking about how he had to reframe his ex. So those messages are not good. It just makes me suspect that he's sending that kind of stuff all the time. And I'm going to just move on. Um, let's see. He reflects on the sheer venom and ferocity of her initial attack on him right after talking about the text message. He talks about how in these disputes, these legal disputes, family court cases, talks about how the system rewards lies with cash and prizes and custody of children. Yeah, I mean, it's not the point of it, but I think because of all of its flaws, the lawyers exploit those flaws, and it ends up becoming the point. So even if it wasn't intended, because the system is so flawed and geared toward the attorneys who control it, it ended up sort of turning into that. He talks about shame and self-loathing from what he calls his ex's moral superiority. He goes into these general concepts of female moral exceptionalism, talks about how it's dangerous, explains how women can behave as horrendously as men can. He compares Google search results on toxic masculinity, which are apparently 8.1 million, to toxic femininity, which is 1.6 million. He's going back into the gender bias stuff. He talks about how there's stories of women abused by women, but there are almost no stories of men abused by women. He touches briefly on the movie Gone Girl. I do recommend this movie to anyone who hasn't seen it. In my opinion, based on as I explained in the past, I have, in my mind, I find the most accurate depiction of narcissistic personality disorder to be by Sam Vaknin. In my opinion, the Gone Girl antagonist is narcissistic personality disordered. It's just a movie, guys, so I mean, take it with a grain of salt. But in my opinion, that is a great example of that type of personality disordered individual. 1969, no-fault divorce in California. He talks about how that spread throughout the country very quickly. I'm not sure why I see some of these fathers' rights groups talk about ending no-fault divorce. That's a terrible idea. That just would allow a father to trap his wanting to be ex into the relationship. The weird way that I've heard this portrayed is that women are too easily manipulated by lawyers, and so men have to be able to fight off the divorce from ever occurring to protect the family's integrity. I mean, it's like, it's completely off the reservation. For me, it's a terrible way to trap people into abusive relationships. There are many problems with the family court system, and the way to deal with the problems is to confront the family court system, not to go back to the end of no-fault divorce. He doesn't, if I remember correctly, he doesn't exactly say that, but when I see him bring that up and criticize the dissolution of the American family, it makes me suspect that that's the direction it's going in, because I've seen other groups, men's rights groups specifically, go in that direction. I don't think I have ever seen a women's rights group try to advocate for a return to no-fault divorce. He does talk a little bit about how women initiate divorces more often, especially if they're educated. Again, though, all of this stuff, I just don't have a strong connection to what he was trying, what the point he was trying to make with it. I can only recall a sort of insinuation of what the point was, which I've already talked about. Depp versus Heard. He actually talks about the Depp versus Heard situation in his book. Now, at the time of the book, this new defamation case was not going on, so he's talking about all of the stuff from before. He talks about how his reputation was savaged by Amber Heard. He talks about how Johnny Depp's reputation was savaged by Amber Heard. He talks about how people like Johnny Depp have deep pockets and are able to fight for truth and reputation reparation, which is something that's not available to most fathers. This is true. And in fact, this is one of the reasons I don't spend a lot of time watching that trial. I've seen some really short clips here and there, but I don't have this strong instinct to go and watch the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial, because that's actually the same sort of thought that I have is, Okay, I already know it's going to show that this is a dispute between one side and the other, and that I guess the way that it's going is it's not really going in Amber Heard's favor. But my thoughts are it's not really something that I appreciate too much, because this is a rich person who has full access to the court system, not just the court system, but also to appeals, and it's a disappointing thing that I feel that way, but it's the truth. I have to tell you guys, it's the truth, and I just can't get much into it. I feel like I already know the story, and I feel like it's hard to really say that this is something that I can relate to, or that I even want to talk about that much. Do I think it's going to help the public understand that there's toxic females out there? I guess. Yeah. I'm not sure, though, how it adds to what I think the solution to the problem is, because at this point I feel like already a lot of people understand this problem. At this point I already feel like the family court system and its issues are on people's radar, especially in Nevada. The thing is, I don't see a plan. I don't see how this is going to turn into statutes, rules, and case law. I don't see how this is going to turn into oversight. So, those are just my thoughts on that. I'm glad that he brought it up. I mean, it kind of does matter, but yeah, and especially I like how he highlights the fact that normal people lack the resources that Johnny Depp has. Problems of bias are ubiquitous. He talks about the whole industry being built around the family law industry with too much money and jobs at stake, and that the radical change needed would start a revolution. I agree with this. I, I, it's so frustrating that this is so true. There is so, I don't know, I don't want to say it's so much money in the sort of sense of the volume of the money. I want to say that it's that the money and the business model of how it all works is so tightly intertwined with the family law industry itself that it any kind of change that would actually shift power from the attorneys and the judges to the families themselves, which is where it should be. Obviously, the kids, the mothers, the fathers, the husbands, and the wives should be the ones that have the power and the clout. Instead, it's the attorneys and the judges. This kind of transition would be considered radical, and would, I guess you could use the word revolutionize the system. And I am not sure that most family law firms would survive it. I don't know what would happen. I mean, if you take enough money out of the family law system, you would find third party providers and family law attorneys and firms evaporating. It would be a very different system. I do think that it is a painful thing that must occur, but I do think that you're going to encounter a tremendous amount of resistance, because the industry itself is going to see this kind of change as an existential threat, as a threat to careers, to entire firms and business. It would terrify them, is what it would terrify them. And so you will see, I mean, a tooth and claw knockdown fight from the industry itself at any attempt to shift the power from the lawyers and judges to moms, dads, husbands, wives, and kids. Uh, it's hard to describe in words how vicious I think the counterattack would be. Sample. Okay, so let's see here. Samples tested positive for opiates. Oh, right. He talks about how he tested positive for opiates because he had a poppy seed muffin, and I guess his ex found out, or his ex's lawyer found out, and filed an ex parte motion or something like that. So first time I've heard that used or referred to in the book. It's a good thing to bring up. Ex parte is a common tool used in these high conflict child custody cases. You basically get to ask for relief without the other side getting to defend themselves. It's a horribly unfair, unbalanced legal mechanism. I have a video called Ex parte Perils where I talk about it. I don't know if I believe that it was a poppy seed muffin that caused him to trigger a positive. But I mean, like, what do I know? I haven't seen his hearings. I haven't seen any documentation. I don't know. I mean, just because I don't believe him doesn't mean I don't disbelieve him. Double negative there. In any event, it doesn't matter. Let's just move on. He does mention the next day in court, mentions how, I guess he says that they tried to take away his joint legal custody. I don't recall him saying that they succeeded, so I'm assuming they failed. He talks about how at the time he had a new judge, and that this judge is the judge he ends up stuck with for the next 3, what he calls excruciating years. He also talks about how he changed lawyers. I don't know why. And that the change in lawyers did cause the hyperbole in the conflict between the two lawyers to go down a lot, but it did not change the results. He talks about how a gross overabundance of caution leads the family court system into doing what it does against fathers. I mean, I can only speak for Nevada, and I do not see that here. Did I see that back in 2008 when I first litigated my child custody case? Yes, I did. I don't see that anymore. I think the judges are moving away from that. I think that is very important. Doesn't mean that other states aren't still doing this. I don't hear great things about California. I just don't. Some of the states that I hear this is something that happens in are North Carolina, California, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Maryland. Off the top of my head, those are just some of the states that I hear people having these issues. He talks about how he ended up paying $200,000 for a new attorney, and he lost anyway. He says that it would have been worth it if he would have won, but he didn't win. And I think a lot of parents feel that way. A lot of parents would spend any amount of money to win a particular issue in family court. It's just they love their kids. And you put all that money into it, sometimes you don't win. And it's just all gone. And it's I mean, I can't even explain it to you guys because I didn't spend that much. I represented myself most of the time. I can't get my head around the fact that I would have lost $200,000 of my own dollars for nothing. It is very difficult for me to understand that because I never went through it. He talks about how his new lawyer shuttled him through more expensive exercises, and he talks about how the advice that his new lawyer gave him actually ended up hurting him. Apparently, the judge vilified him for thinking he knew better than the court system and ignoring the judge's specific orders and doing what his lawyer told him to do instead. He talked about how he talked about the insanity of following your lawyer's advice and actually losing because you did what you're supposed to do, which is follow your lawyer's advice. He talks about how that judge who admonished him disregarded over 100 contempts that his ex committed. Again, guys, when it comes to contempts, you got to watch the videos. Gotcha litigation and also agreements ignored. A lot of the contempts come and go based on those two areas. He talks about how his third lawyer apparently helped him through the child abuse stuff with CPS. I guess his third lawyer was an expert on CPS. He says that he was in the Child Abuse Central Index and the Department of Justice Index, and that there was modifications to his original report that triggered him being expunged from those databases. He talks about how even though he was exonerated of child abuse and wrongdoing, that the exculpatory report had no retroactive effect on his reputation or even vindication. In his own words, even though the truth was forcing its way through the cracks, he wasn't seeing that materialize in a way that he would appreciate. And I can understand that. That's something I talk about in the video, Overcoming Lies Moving Forward. I get it. Renewal hearing to revive the restraining order. Okay, we have these in Nevada too. So these orders for protection against domestic violence can be extended out to a year maximum, and you can try and renew them. He talks about how at the next hearing, There were insinuated threats. He was accused of breaking into her house, burgling her house, ransacking her house, how it cost him $10,000 in legal fees, how his attorney gave up on him in open court, and how the judge granted his ex's request for a renewal, giving her basically another year of restraint, that he wasn't allowed to go near the house, that he couldn't contact his ex or his sons or visit the school, all that stuff. He talks about how, I guess, right after that hearing, his lawyer resigned from representing him, and she told him this apparently as she was stepping into her, what he calls, shiny Bentley. Um, each time that he defended an issue, he felt like a new issue would come up. I kind of felt like this on in my case, and I think I talk about this in the video, They Will Never Say Good Things. If you do manage to unequivocally solve one of the false accusations that your ex has brought against you, they will look for a different accusation. They can't just stop and say everything is fine now. And I explained that in the video, They Will Never Say Good Things. Life consumed his life was consumed by therapy, drug testing, legal paperwork, and deadlines. Of course, this is something I've talked about in the past with my case and how it affected my ability to graduate by dragging my schooling out to 12 years. He touches on the fact that, okay, so I can't remember which lawyer, but he mentions that one of his lawyers apparently told him a story where her client, a father, killed his own son, and I guess Greg Ellis watches the sentencing video of that case and tries to understand the impact that this father who killed his own child had on his, what I believe is former lawyer, and on the family law system and on the judges. And yeah, I mean, I understand that. I mean, that happens. Sometimes it's the other way around. We had a case here in Nevada where a mom drowned her kid in a tub after she got custody. She went to court. She said, "Judge, I need custody to save my child." The judge said, "Yes, here you go. Save your child from his horrible father." She said, "Thank you, Judge." Took her kid home, drowned him in the tub. And I guess it affected the judge. I mean, of course it did. And affected the family court system. I mean, it's hard. These judges have these two parents coming into court. And every now and then, it's rare, but it happens. There's a parent who will tell the judge, "You have to give me my kid, because if you don't, my ex is going to kill him." And then they give the parent the kid just like they asked, and they turn around, go home, and kill their own child. I can't imagine how it feels to a judge to have been duped into facilitating the death of a child. But, I mean, what can you do? I mean, a judge only has the information that they have in front of them, and I mean, I like that Greg Ellis goes through this because it is a real thing that happens. It's happened apparently in California. It's happened in Nevada. It's probably happened in every state at least once. And I guess it's something as a society that people have to figure out how to process. The last thing that he talks about at the very end is how he walked into traffic with cars nearly hitting him. I'm reading this as a suicide attempt. And I don't know what to think, because I never thought about doing this, but I do understand why a parent would think about doing this. I do understand that, especially when you couple taking away a parent's child with financially destroying them, financially annihilating them. If you have one or the other, it's not as bad, but it's both that I really think does a parent in. I mean, I feel bad because I feel like I should feel something. And I don't want to lie and say that I do understand his plight and I understand where he's coming from, because I didn't go through that. And it's just not something that I should say, since I personally didn't go through that and since I didn't have those thoughts. But he does talk about that towards the end of the chapter. And I do want to at least mention that to you guys. I wish I had more to say on that. And really, it's just an area that I can't relate to. I can say that I understand, but I can't say that I personally empathize or had feelings like that. It's just one of the reasons why family court has to be looked at more carefully. Anyway, I guess that's all I have for this chapter. It was a tough chapter, not just because it was long, but because there was a lot to think about for me. If you have any questions, feel free to post them down in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.